Colorado Territory, 1877. The mountains loomed like silent sentries over the remote valley where Owen Grant dismounted from his sorrel gelding. At 25, he already wore the weathered expression of a man who'd seen too much of the frontier's harshness. The Civil War had ended 12 years ago, but Owen still carried the shadows of battle in his clear blue eyes, shadows that made him seek solitude rather than the company of others. The abandoned cabin before him was exactly what he sought. Isolated, forgotten, nestled against the mountainside like it had grown there naturally. Its logs had silvered with age, the small porch sagged slightly, but the structure remained sound. Perfect for a man who believed the frontier was no place for connections, for vulnerability, for anything beyond mere survival. "This'll do just fine," he muttered to his horse, patting the animal's neck. "No one to bother us here." Owen had spent 3 years drifting across the West, taking odd jobs at ranches, guiding hunting parties, sleeping under the stars more often than not. His skill with horses and tracking had earned him enough to purchase this remote homestead. 10 acres of mountain valley with a creek running through it, the abandoned cabin, and blessed isolation. As he led his horse toward the rickety corral, Owen surveyed his new kingdom. The spring grass grew thick in the meadow. The surrounding pines offered firewood. Game trails crisscrossed the nearby hills. A man could live here, alone but well-fed, for years without needing much from civilization. That was the plan. People complicated things. Trust was a luxury he couldn't afford, not after watching his regiment brothers fall one by one in battle, not after losing his family farm to unscrupulous bankers back east. "No neighbors for miles," he told the horse, satisfaction coloring his words. "Just how I want it." Yet as evening descended over the valley and Owen built his first fire in the cabin's stone hearth, an unfamiliar hollowness pressed against his ribs. He'd gotten what he wanted. His own place, away from the complications of people and their demands, their betrayals, their fragility. So why did the crackling fire and the cabin's silence feel so empty? Owen pushed the thought away. Loneliness was safer than loss. He'd learned that lesson too many times to forget it now. The spring sunshine streamed through gaps in the cabin roof when Owen woke the next morning. He'd slept on his bedroll, not yet having assembled the crude bed frame pushed against one wall. His first day as a landowner stretched before him with endless tasks: patching the roof, repairing the corral, hunting for meat, checking the perimeter. He was halfway through mending a loose shingle when the unmistakable sound of hoofbeats approached from the valley below. Owen's hand instinctively moved to the revolver on his hip, eyes narrowing as he peered down from the roofline. A rider approached. No, not just any rider. A woman. Even from a distance, the flowing skirts and the way she sat side-saddle on the chestnut mare made that clear. Owen frowned. What business could a woman possibly have this far into the wilderness? He descended from the roof carefully, positioning himself on the porch with deliberate casualness, though his hand never strayed far from his pistol. As the rider drew closer, details emerged. Honey blonde hair flowing from beneath a practical hat, a blue calico dress dusty from the trail, and a determined set to delicate shoulders. She reined her horse to a stop about 20 feet from the cabin, assessing him just as carefully as he assessed her. "You must be the new owner," she called, her voice clear as mountain water. "I'm Katherine Blackburn. Most folks call me Kate." "Owen Grant," he replied curtly. "What brings you out this far, Miss Blackburn?" The young woman, she couldn't be more than 20, smiled with unexpected warmth. "I've come to welcome you to Silver Pine Valley, and to inform you you're trespassing on my hunting grounds." The statement, delivered with such calm certainty, caught Owen off guard. "Ma'am, I purchased this homestead legal and proper in Denver last month. I've got the papers to prove it." Kate Blackburn dismounted with practiced ease, leading her mare forward. Up close, Owen could see her eyes were the clear green of pine needles in spring, her face sun-kissed and beautiful without artifice. She moved with the confidence of someone born to the mountains. "Oh, I don't dispute your ownership of the cabin and the immediate clearing," she said, gesturing to the surrounding area. "But the North Ridge there and the valley beyond, that's where my family has hunted for generations. There's an arrangement with everyone who's owned this place." Owen crossed his arms. "There's no such arrangement in my deed." "No," she agreed, "there wouldn't be. It's an understanding among neighbors." "I don't recall asking for neighbors," Owen replied. the words sharper than intended. Kate's smile didn't waver, though something flashed in her eyes, recognition, perhaps, of the wall he'd built around himself. No one ever does out here, but we get them anyway. The mountains decide who belongs and who doesn't. The peculiar statement hung in the air between them. There was something disarming about this young woman that made Owen uncomfortable. She looked at him as though she could read the shadows in his soul. "Well, Miss Blackburn, as the legal owner of this property, I'll have to consider your arrangement. But I came here for privacy." Kate nodded thoughtfully. Privacy is plentiful in these mountains. Survival less so. She reached into her saddlebag and withdrew a cloth-wrapped package. Venison jerky and dried berries. My welcome gift. The first winter's always the hardest. Owen hesitated before accepting the package. The unexpected kindness felt like a trap, but refusing would be pointless rudeness. "Your roof needs more than a few patches," she observed, looking up at his morning's work. First heavy snow would collapse the east corner. "I can manage my own repairs," he said stiffly. "Of course you can," Kate replied, mounting her horse again with fluid grace. "But the mountain doesn't care about your pride, Mr. Grant. It only respects preparation and respect." She gathered her reins. "I live about 3 miles northeast, where the creek forks around the big boulder. If you need anything, follow the creek up." Before Owen could formulate a response that wouldn't sound ungrateful or overly welcoming, she had turned her horse and was riding away, her blonde hair catching the sunlight like a banner. Owen watched until she disappeared among the trees, feeling as though a whirlwind had briefly touched down in his carefully planned solitude. He unwrapped the package of jerky and berries, finding them expertly preserved and surprisingly flavorful. "Don't get used to company," he reminded himself aloud. Yet the silence that followed felt different somehow, less like peace and more like absence. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of physical labor. Owen repaired the roof, patched the walls, cleaned the small stone fireplace, constructed a proper bed, and built shelves along one wall. The work left him exhausted each night, too tired to think about the war, about loss, about the strange young woman who had appeared and disappeared like a mountain mirage. But on the 15th day, as Owen tracked a deer through the northern woods, he found himself at the edge of a small clearing he hadn't explored before. In the center stood a curious sight, a circular arrangement of stones with various objects placed ceremonially around it. Feathers, small carved figures, bundles of herbs. "I wouldn't disturb that if I were you." Owen spun around, his rifle half raised before he recognized Kate Blackburn standing at the edge of the trees. Today she wore buckskin trousers beneath a practical split-riding skirt, her blonde hair braided down her back. She looked even younger in the dappled forest light, barely 20, he guessed, but her eyes held an old wisdom. "What is this place?" Owen asked, lowering his weapon. "A prayer circle. My mother's people maintained it for generations." Kate approached, standing beside him to look at the arrangement. She was Ute. "My father was a trapper who loved her enough to learn her ways." Owen glanced sideways at her. The revelation of her mixed heritage explained her unusual appearance. The honey blonde hair and green eyes from her father, the high cheekbones and sun-kissed complexion from her mother. "You said was," Owen observed quietly. "They both passed 3 winters ago. Influenza." Kate's voice remained steady, but Owen recognized the careful control. He knew that particular mask well. "I've been on my own since." The information shifted something in Owen's perception. "You live alone? A young woman in these mountains?" Kate's smile returned, slightly teasing. "Just like a young man in these mountains. Is one more surprising than the other?" Owen had no ready answer. He'd been raised to believe women needed protection, especially on the frontier. Yet this woman moved through the wilderness with more confidence than many seasoned trappers he'd encountered. "Where were you headed?" Kate asked, nodding toward his rifle. "Tracking a buck. Lost the trail about a quarter-mile back." She considered this. "He's likely headed for the aspen grove beyond the ridge. There's fresh water there, and the young shoots they like to browse." She gestured north. "I can show you." Owen's instinct was to refuse, to maintain the distance he'd deliberately created. But practical considerations won out. Winter would come soon enough, and meat would be essential. "Lead on," he said simply. Kate moved through the forest with silent efficiency. She didn't speak unnecessarily, didn't make small talk or ask probing questions. Instead, She pointed out useful plants along the way, which berries were edible, which leaves could treat fever, which bark made good tea. They found the buck exactly where she'd predicted, a magnificent 6-point drinking from a small spring. Owen raised his rifle, sighted carefully, and squeezed the trigger. The shot echoed across the valley as the buck dropped instantly. Clean kill, Kate observed approvingly. Together they field-dressed the animal, Kate's hands as sure and steady as his own. When they finished dividing the meat, Owen insisting she take half for guiding him. The sun was lowering toward the western peaks. "You should come to my cabin," Kate said unexpectedly. "It's closer than yours, and you don't want to be carrying fresh meat through these woods after dark. The mountain lions would smell it miles away." The invitation triggered Owen's wariness, but her reasoning was sound. He nodded agreement, and they set off with their bundles of wrapped venison. Kate's cabin was smaller than his, but infinitely more refined. Built against a massive boulder that served as its back wall, it featured a stone chimney, glass windows, and a covered porch. Inside, dried herbs hung from the rafters, colorful woven blankets adorned the walls, and bookshelves held a surprising collection of volumes. "You like to read," Owen observed, surprised. "My father taught me. My mother taught me everything else." Kate hung the venison from hooks in her rafters, then stoked the fire. "He was educated back east before he came west. Made sure I knew Shakespeare as well as how to track elk." As darkness fell outside, Kate prepared a simple but savory stew. Owen found himself sharing the small table with her, answering her occasional questions about his travels, carefully avoiding mention of the war or anything before it. "So you came west to be alone," Kate summarized as they finished eating. "Yet you bought a cabin in my valley." "Your valley?" Owen raised an eyebrow. Kate's smile was enigmatic. "The mountain claimed me long ago, Mr. Grant. I'm just acknowledging the relationship." She stood to clear their bowls. "You can take the bedroll by the fire. I'll sleep in the loft." Owen started to protest, but Kate silenced him with a look. "The mountain gets cold at night, and you have a long walk back tomorrow. Pride is a poor blanket." That night, wrapped in borrowed blankets before Kate's fire, Owen stared at the dancing shadows on her cabin walls. The woman sleeping in the loft above him was an enigma, part frontier survivor, part educated lady, part mountain spirit. She challenged his carefully constructed belief that isolation was the only safe path. For the first time since buying his cabin, Owen wondered if complete solitude was truly what he wanted. Spring turned toward summer. Owen found himself exploring the northern sections of his property more frequently, telling himself it was merely to hunt or gather herbs Kate had taught him to identify. If these excursions occasionally brought him near her cabin or their paths happened to cross, it seemed a natural coincidence of mountain life. Kate never intruded on his solitude uninvited, yet she was generous with her knowledge when they did meet. She showed him how to smoke fish from the creek, where to find the sweetest berries, which plants repelled insects from the garden he'd started. On a particularly warm June afternoon, Owen was repairing his corral when Kate rode up, her expression unusually serious. "Riders coming up from the south," she announced without preamble. "3 men, heavily armed. They've been asking about you in town." Owen's hand moved instinctively to his sidearm. "Did you hear names?" "One's called Redding." Tall man with a scar across his chin. The name hit Owen like a physical blow. Thomas Redding had been a Confederate irregular during the war, known for brutality against civilians. After the war, he'd formed a gang that preyed on homesteaders across Kansas and Colorado. 3 years ago, when Redding's men had attacked a farm where Owen was working, Owen had shot and killed Redding's brother in the defense. "You know him," Kate observed, reading his expression. "We have history," Owen confirmed grimly. "How far out?" "They were asking questions at Wilson's store this morning. They'll reach your place by sundown." Kate's green eyes studied him. They didn't look like social callers. Owen nodded, his mind racing. "You should ride back to your cabin and stay there, Miss Blackburn. This isn't your concern." Kate dismounted, tying her horse to the corral post with deliberate movements. "The mountain brought you here for a reason, Mr. Grant. That makes it my concern." "Kate," Owen said, using her first name without thinking, "these men are dangerous. They won't hesitate to hurt anyone in their way, which is precisely why you shouldn't face them alone." She crossed her arms, the gesture so determined that Owen almost smiled despite the gravity of the situation. "My father didn't just teach me Shakespeare, you know." Before Owen could argue further, she added. Besides, I know these mountains better than anyone. If we need to disappear, I can make that happen. The we hung between them, an unexpected alliance that shook Owen's conviction that he stood alone against the world. As sunset approached, Owen and Kate had transformed the cabin into a defensible position. They'd blocked the back windows, positioned rifles at strategic points, and prepared an escape route through the woods if necessary. Kate had changed into dark trousers and a jacket, her blonde hair hidden beneath a hat, a revolver holstered at her hip. "Why are you doing this?" Owen asked quietly as they waited by the front window. "You could be safely at your cabin." Kate was silent for a long moment. "My father used to say that mountains and people aren't so different. Both can stand alone, but they're stronger when they stand together." She looked at him directly. "I've watched you these past months, fighting to stay isolated even as you drift closer to my cabin each week. The mountain doesn't want you alone, Owen Grant. Neither do I." The unexpected confession left Owen speechless. Before he could respond, the sound of approaching horses reached them through the evening air. 3 riders appeared at the edge of the clearing, approaching slowly. Owen recognized Redding immediately, tall and broad-shouldered, with the distinctive scar Kate had described. The other 2 were typical hired guns, rough-looking men with cold eyes. "Stay inside," Owen murmured to Kate. "Let me handle this." He stepped onto the porch, rifle held casually but ready, as the riders stopped about 30 feet from the cabin. "Redding," Owen acknowledged coldly. "You're trespassing on private property." The scarred man smiled without warmth. "Grant, been tracking you for a while now. You're a hard man to find. I prefer it that way. State your business and move on." Redding's smile widened. "My business is settling debts. You put my brother in the ground. Your brother was robbing innocent farmers. He got what outlaws get." Owen's voice remained steady, though his heart hammered against his ribs. "Maybe so, but family's family." Redding's hand hovered near his holster. "I figure you owe me a life. I've come to collect." The tension crackled like lightning before a storm. Owen measured distances, angles, his chances against 3 armed men. Not good, but he'd faced worse odds. "You boys look thirsty after your long ride," came Kate's voice suddenly from behind Owen. She had stepped onto the porch beside him, a rifle held confidently in her hands. "Shame you won't be staying long enough for refreshments." Surprise flickered across Redding's face, quickly replaced by cruel amusement. "Didn't know you had a woman, Grant. Changes things interesting like." "The lady is my neighbor," Owen said evenly. "This is between us, Redding." "No," Kate corrected, her voice cool and clear in the evening air. "This is my mountain. You gentlemen are all visitors here." One of Redding's men snickered. "Listen to her. Her mountain. What do you think, boss? Should we teach her some manners after we finish with Grant?" The threatening words awakened something primal in Owen. Not just fear, but fierce protectiveness. Kate had inserted herself into his fight despite his warnings, standing beside him when anyone else would have fled. The realization struck him with unexpected force. For the first time since the war, he cared deeply what happened to another person. "You won't touch her," Owen said. His voice dropped dangerously low. "Leave now, Redding, while you still can." Redding's expression hardened. 3 guns against 2. Those aren't odds I'm afraid of. "Count again," came a new voice from the tree line. All heads turned to see 5 men on horseback emerging from the forest edge, rifles trained on Redding's group. Owen recognized Wilson from the general store and several other men from the nearest settlement. "Miss Kate sent word there might be trouble," Wilson called. "We don't cotton to outlaws in our valley." Redding's face contorted with fury as he realized he'd been outmaneuvered. His hand twitched toward his gun, but Owen's rifle barrel rose a fraction. "Don't," Owen warned quietly. "Not worth dying over." For a terrible moment, violence hung in the balance. Then Redding slowly raised his hands, his men following suit. "This isn't over, Grant," he growled. "Yes," Owen replied steadily, "it is." Wilson and his men disarmed Redding's group. "Sheriff Palmer's waiting in town," Wilson explained. These 3 matched the description on wanted posters. Seems they've been busy across 3 territories. As the townsman led the outlaws away, Owen turned to Kate, who was watching him with an unreadable expression. "You sent for help," he said, the words half question, half accusation. "I did." She didn't apologize. "Pride gets people killed out here. You could have gotten yourself killed," standing beside me like that." Kate's gaze was steady. "Some things are worth the risk." The words hung between them as twilight deepened into night. Wilson and one other rider returned after escorting the prisoners to town, bringing news that Redding and his men would face a judge in Denver for multiple counts of robbery and murder. "You two should come to the summer dance next weekend," Wilson suggested as he prepared to leave. "Whole town would like to thank you proper." After they'd gone, Owen and Kate sat on the porch steps, the night settling around them like a blanket. Stars appeared overhead, countless and brilliant in the mountain darkness. "Thank you," Owen said finally, "for sending for help. For not leaving." Kate smiled, the expression barely visible in the starlight. "The mountain protects its own. And am I one of its own now?" Owen asked, surprising himself with the question. Kate turned toward him, her face solemn in the darkness. "That depends on whether you're still determined to stand alone." The question struck at the heart of everything Owen had believed since the war. That connection meant vulnerability, that solitude meant safety. Yet here in this moment, with this remarkable woman beside him, those beliefs suddenly seemed hollow. "I thought I needed to be alone to survive," he admitted. "The war taught me that caring about people just meant losing them. And has being alone made the losses hurt any less?" Kate asked gently. Owen considered this. "No. It just meant there'd be no new losses. No new joys either." Kate's hand found his in the darkness, warm and certain. "The mountain doesn't promise safety, Owen. Nothing can. It only promises that some things are worth the risk." In that moment, with Redding's threat neutralized and Kate's hand in his, Owen felt something long frozen begin to thaw inside him. The walls he'd built around himself hadn't protected him from pain. They'd only prevented healing. "Would you show me," he asked quietly, "how to belong to the mountain?" Kate's smile was like sunrise. "I thought you'd never ask." The summer months passed in a whirl of change. Owen and Kate attended the town dance together, where Owen discovered that the isolated mountain's daughter, as locals called Kate, was actually well respected in the community. She had inherited her father's medical knowledge and her mother's herbal wisdom, making her an invaluable resource when the doctor from Denver only visited monthly. Owen found himself drawn into the community as well. His skills with horses and carpentry were in high demand, and he began trading work for supplies, building connections he'd never planned but increasingly valued. Most evenings, however, found him with Kate, sometimes at his cabin, sometimes at hers, sharing meals and stories as summer stars wheeled overhead. She taught him to identify plants by moonlight, to read weather in the mountain's moods, to listen to the forest's whispers. In turn, he shared parts of himself he'd locked away for years. Memories of his family in Pennsylvania, stories of his regiment brothers, even the horrors he'd witnessed during the war. Kate listened without judgment, her presence a balm to wounds he'd thought would never heal. By August, Owen had begun spending more nights at Kate's cabin than his own. Their relationship had evolved naturally from friendship to something deeper, sealed with tentative kisses that grew more certain with each passing day. For the first time since the war, Owen allowed himself to imagine a future beyond mere survival. Then came the letter that shattered everything. It arrived via a passing trader, addressed to Owen in unfamiliar handwriting. The contents were brief but devastating. His younger brother Michael, whom Owen had believed dead at Gettysburg, was alive. Captured and imprisoned during the war, he'd spent years recovering from injuries at a hospital in Washington. Only recently had he managed to trace Owen's movements west. Michael was coming to Colorado. He would arrive by month's end. Owen read the letter 3 times before folding it carefully and riding to Kate's cabin. She listened silently as he explained, her green eyes watching him with characteristic perception. "You're afraid," she observed when he finished. "I mourned him," Owen admitted. "I accepted his death, built a life around it. And now you have to rebuild your understanding of the world." Kate took his hands in hers. "Just as you've been doing since you came to the mountain." Owen nodded, but unspoken fears lingered. "He knew me before the war changed me. What if I'm not the brother he remembers?" "Of course you're not," Kate said practically. "And he's not the same young man who went to war either. But you're still brothers." Her words made sense, yet as August waned, Owen found himself withdrawing, spending more time at his own cabin, making repairs with almost frantic energy, as though preparing for judgment. The prospect of reconnecting with his past life, with family who knew him before the shadows, terrified him in ways facing down Redding never had. Kate noticed the change but didn't push, giving him space while remaining steadfastly present when he sought her company. It was during one such evening at her cabin, as September's first chill tinged the air, that Owen finally voiced his deepest fear. "What if I can't be both men?" he asked as they sat by her fire. "The brother Michael remembers, and the man I've become here, with you?" Kate studied him thoughtfully. "When I was 16, there was a terrible blizzard. My father was away trading, and my mother and I were alone. The temperature dropped so fast that the creek froze solid in hours." She poked the fire, sending sparks dancing upward. "Our cabin walls cracked from the cold. We huddled by the fire for 3 days, burning everything we could to stay alive." Owen listened, uncertain where her story was leading. "When spring came," Kate continued, "my father helped us repair the damaged walls. But instead of trying to make them look like they had before, my mother insisted on weaving red thread through the cracks in the logs." Kate gestured to one wall of her cabin, where Owen now noticed faint red lines running through the wood. She said the breaking and mending were part of the cabin's story now. Trying to hide the cracks would dishonor what we'd survived. She reached across to take his hand. "The war cracked you, Owen. Meeting me changed you too. Michael's arrival will reshape you again. But all of it, the breaking and mending, it's all you. You don't have to choose between being my Owen and being Michael's brother." Her words, "my Owen," sent warmth through him, and he pulled her close, burying his face in her honey-blonde hair. "How did the mountain make someone so wise?" he murmured. Kate laughed softly against his chest. "The mountain doesn't make wisdom. It just gives you enough silence to hear your own heart." When Michael Grant arrived 2 weeks later, he came not on horseback as Owen expected, but in a wagon driven by Wilson from town. As the vehicle approached Owen's cabin, he stood rigidly on the porch, Kate a reassuring presence beside him. The man who climbed carefully down from the wagon bore only a passing resemblance to the enthusiastic young brother Owen remembered. Michael was 30 now, his left leg supported by a wooden prosthesis, his once round face leaner, older, marked by the same shadows Owen saw in his own mirror. But when their eyes met across the yard, recognition flared instantly. "Owen," Michael said, his voice breaking. "They told me you might be dead." "I thought you were," Owen replied, descending the porch steps slowly, as though approaching a mirage that might vanish. They stood facing each other, years of absence and grief stretching between them. Then Michael stepped forward, his artificial leg moving stiffly, and embraced his brother with fierce strength. "I looked everywhere," Michael said, his voice muffled against Owen's shoulder. "Pennsylvania, Kansas, Nebraska. Finally got word you'd come to Colorado." Owen held his brother tightly, emotions he'd locked away for years breaking free at last. "I should have looked harder," he whispered. "I'm sorry. We both survived," Michael said, pulling back to look at his brother's face. "That's what matters now." As the initial shock of reunion faded, Owen introduced Kate, who welcomed Michael with genuine warmth. Over dinner that evening, the brothers began the slow process of bridging the years between them. Michael had become a teacher in a small Pennsylvania town, specializing in helping other wounded veterans. He'd married a nurse from the hospital where he'd recovered, and they had a young daughter named Elizabeth. "Sarah and Lizzie are staying with her parents until I found you," Michael explained. "I wanted to make sure." He hesitated. "To make sure you were ready for visitors." Owen understood the unspoken question. Many veterans had returned from war broken beyond repair, lost to drink or rage or madness. Michael had needed to see his brother's state for himself before bringing his family west. "I wasn't ready," Owen admitted honestly. "Not for a long time." He glanced at Kate. "But I am now." In the days that followed, Owen watched with growing wonder as Kate and Michael formed an easy friendship. She showed genuine interest in his teaching work, while he was fascinated by her knowledge of native plants and medicines. Together, they began planning expansions to Owen's cabin to accommodate Michael's family during their extended visit. "She's remarkable," Michael observed one evening as the brothers sat alone on the porch. Kate had returned to her cabin to prepare healing salves from the day's gathered herbs. "The way she reads these mountains, like they speak to her." Owen nodded, watching the sunset paint the western peaks. "She calls herself the mountain's daughter." "I thought it was just talk at first." He smiled slightly. I know better now. Michael studied his brother thoughtfully. You love her. It wasn't a question, but Owen answered anyway. Yes. Have you told her? Owen shook his head. Not in those words. Why not? Michael asked, the direct question reminiscent of their younger, simpler days. Owen considered this. After the war, I convinced myself love was a luxury I couldn't afford. That caring about people just meant eventual pain. He looked at his brother. I came here to be alone. And instead, you found her. She found me. Owen corrected. Showed up the day after I arrived. Informed me I was trespassing on her hunting grounds. The memory brought a smile to his face. Been showing me the error of my ways ever since. Michael laughed. Sounds like you needed finding, brother. Owen nodded, the truth of it settling in his chest like a warm stone. I did. That night, after Michael had retired to the small bedroom Owen had prepared for him, Owen rode through the moonlit forest to Kate's cabin. He found her on her porch, wrapped in a blanket against the September chill, watching the stars. I expected you'd stay with your brother tonight, she said as he approached. He's asleep. Owen settled beside her on the porch step. And I needed to see you. Kate's smile was visible in the moonlight. How does it feel, having part of your old life join your new one? Strange, Owen admitted. But good. Like finding a piece of myself I thought was gone forever. He took her hand, intertwining their fingers. It's made me realize something. What's that? That I've been afraid of the wrong things. Owen turned to face her fully. I was so determined to avoid loss that I nearly missed finding you. So afraid of pain that I almost refused joy. Kate's eyes reflected the starlight as she watched him. And now I know that some risks are worth taking. Owen took a deep breath. I love you, Katherine Blackburn. I think I have since you rode up to my cabin that first day and claimed my mountain as your own. Kate's smile bloomed like a rare mountain flower. It was always my mountain, she teased gently. But I'm willing to share it with the right person. Is that what I am? Owen asked. The right person? Instead of answering, Kate leaned forward and kissed him, her lips warm despite the cool night air. When they parted, she whispered, The mountain brought you to me for a reason, Owen Grant. I've known that since the beginning. And what reason is that? Kate's eyes held his, serious now. So we could build something stronger together than either of us could alone. The first snow fell in late October, dusting the valley with white that glittered in the morning sunlight. By then, Michael's wife Sarah and their daughter Elizabeth had arrived, turning Owen's once lonely cabin into a home filled with laughter and activity. The two families worked together to prepare for the coming winter, smoking meat, preserving fruits, gathering firewood. Kate had become a beloved aunt to 5-year-old Elizabeth, who followed the mountain lady everywhere, learning the names of plants and animals with a child's eager absorption. Sarah, a practical and warm-hearted woman, had formed a quick friendship with Kate, the two women often working side by side at kitchen tasks or medicinal preparations. As the first heavy snows of November approached, Michael approached Owen with an unexpected proposal. Sarah and I have been talking, he said as they chopped wood behind the cabin. We're thinking of staying. Owen paused mid-swing, his axe suspended. Staying? What about your teaching position? Michael leaned on his own axe, his expression thoughtful. There's no school in your settlement. The children travel 10 miles to Silver Pine when weather permits. The town council approached me about starting a school here. You'd give up Pennsylvania for this wilderness? Owen asked, surprised. Michael gestured toward the mountains rising majestically around them. This wilderness has been better medicine for my leg than any doctor's prescription. Sarah says she hasn't seen me this strong in years. He smiled. Besides, Lizzie would never forgive us if we took her away from her Aunt Kate. The casual acknowledgement of Kate's place in their family touched Owen deeply. Over the past months, she had become an integral part of not just his life, but his reunited families as well. The cabin that Owen had purchased for isolation had become the center of a growing community. Michael and Sarah often hosted other settlers for dinner. Kate taught local women her herbal knowledge, and children increasingly appeared in the yard, drawn by Elizabeth's stories of her wonderful Aunt Kate. That evening, with the first serious snowstorm building on the horizon, Owen asked Kate to walk with him to the prayer circle she had shown him months before. They made their way through the forest as twilight descended, snow crunching beneath their boots. The stone circle looked different in winter, more ancient somehow, the offerings partially covered by snow, yet still powerfully present. Kate brushed snow from the center stone, her movements respectful. My mother would come here before every winter, she explained, to ask the mountain's blessing for the cold months ahead. Owen watched her, this extraordinary woman who had transformed his understanding of what home could be. What would she ask for? Protection, sufficient food, warmth. Kate smiled up at him. The essentials. And what do you ask for? Owen inquired softly. Kate considered this. When I was alone after my parents died, I asked for strength, for the wisdom to survive alone. Her green eyes met his. I don't ask for that anymore. The weight of the moment settled around them. The approaching storm, the sacred space, the journey they had taken from strangers to something far deeper. Owen took both her hands in his. Katherine Blackburn, he said, his voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. When I bought that lonely cabin, I thought I was purchasing solitude. Instead, I found you, the mountain's daughter, who taught me that walls don't keep pain out, they keep healing away. He knelt in the snow before her, still holding her hands. I came here believing the frontier was no place for love. You showed me it's the perfect place, that love doesn't make us vulnerable, it makes us stronger. From his pocket, he withdrew a simple ring fashioned from silver and turquoise, purchased on his last trip to town with Michael's guidance. Will you marry me, Kate? Make my cabin truly a home, and share this mountain with me for the rest of our days. Kate's eyes shimmered with emotion in the fading light. The mountain has already joined us, she said softly, but I would be honored to make it official before God and community. She pulled him to his feet and into her embrace as the first snowflakes of the storm began to fall around them. Their kiss was a promise, a covenant with each other and with the mountain that had brought them together. Spring came to the valley in a riot of wildflowers and new growth. The winter had been harsh but beautiful, with Owen and Kate dividing their time between the two cabins until the deepest snows made travel between them impossible. Those separated weeks had only strengthened their certainty that their future lay together. The wedding took place on the first truly warm day of May, beneath the spreading branches of an ancient pine near Kate's prayer circle. The entire settlement turned out for the celebration, along with visitors from neighboring communities who had heard the story of the reclusive veteran and the remarkable mountain woman who had healed him. Owen stood waiting as Kate approached, led by Michael, who had agreed to stand in for her father. She wore a dress of creamy buckskin adorned with intricate beadwork, her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved for this day. Her honey-blonde hair was crowned with a circlet of spring flowers, and her green eyes shone with love as she took Owen's hands before the minister. Their vows were simple but profound, spoken with the mountains as witnesses. They promised to stand together through winter storms and summer bounty, to build a home where healing could flourish, to honor the lessons of the mountain that had brought them together. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Owen drew Kate into his arms, kissing her as their friends and family applauded. Little Elizabeth threw flower petals around them, giggling with delight. The celebration continued well into evening, with music and dancing in the clearing between the two cabins. As twilight descended, Owen found Kate watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and rose. "Happy, Mrs. Grant?" he asked, slipping an arm around her waist. Kate leaned into him, her head resting against his shoulder. "Complete," she corrected, like the final piece of a puzzle falling into place. Owen nodded, understanding perfectly. "I came here believing I needed to be alone to be safe," he murmured. "You taught me that real safety comes from belonging. To you, to family, to community. To the mountain," Kate added, smiling up at him. "To the mountain," Owen agreed, looking out over the valley that had transformed from a place of exile to the center of his world. As stars appeared overhead and music drifted from the celebration behind them, Owen Grant held his wife close, marveling at how the lonely cabin he had purchased as a refuge from connection had become the foundation of a rich, interconnected life. The mountain had indeed known what he needed better than he did himself. In the years that followed, Owen and Kate's home became the heart of the growing settlement. They expanded the original cabin, incorporating elements from Kate's smaller home to create a unique dwelling that honored both their stories. A school rose nearby under Michael's direction, then a small clinic where Kate practiced her healing arts, combining her mother's traditional knowledge with modern medicine. Children eventually came. First a son with Owen's blue eyes and Kate's determined spirit, then twin daughters who raced through the mountain forests with the same confidence their mother had always shown. Owen taught them to ride and build. Kate taught them the mountain's secrets and stories. Together, they created a family rooted in the understanding that love wasn't a vulnerability, but the greatest strength humans could possess. On warm summer evenings, neighbors often gathered on the Grants' wide porch to hear Kate's stories of the mountain or Owen's carefully edited tales of his travels. Young couples sought their advice. Children brought them interesting rocks and flowers, and travelers always found welcome at their table. And sometimes, when the house grew quiet and the children slept, Owen and Kate would walk hand in hand to the prayer circle in the forest. There, beneath the vast canopy of stars, they would renew their gratitude to the mountain that had brought a lonely man and a solitary woman together, teaching them that the heart, like the wilderness, wasn't meant to be conquered or tamed, only respected, honored, and shared.